the Christian men, where they still say, hey, God is still the most important and high, but that doesn't mean who you are is low. I said that if people have never been told that they're valuable, or if their whole life they've been told they're not valuable, then why would they value themselves? And so I think the idea of being your own best friend can be like put into this category of self-care that's like you are your own end. Yourself is like the most important thing over God.
So last episode, if you didn't catch it, we spoke about the importance of becoming your own best friend. When we stopped the cameras rolling, Mrs. Mo Parks raised some great points. So this is going to be a continuation of that conversation. So you might want to go back and listen to that one first. But if not, here goes. So you're going to raise another point.
Yes.
So just to give a little bit of backstory here for somebody that didn't catch the last episode, where we're talking about the importance of being your own best friend and how it's a struggle for a lot of people. We were having a little bit of a debate, right? I was saying, well, why is it so hard? Because the definition, I don't recall the definition offhand that we had written out, was something along the lines of being your own best friend means treating yourself with the same kindness, compassion, and understanding that you'd give to a close friend, enabling you to just navigate life in a much easier way. Mm-hmm. Which, when we heard the definition in that way, it made a lot of sense to both of us, right? And as we were talking about, well, why do people make it hard? Why do people resist it? It led to the idea of, okay, well, would this be something that some advice that you give your kids?
Yeah.
To which most people say, well, yeah, of course I would want my kids to look at themselves and treat themselves that way. Okay, well, so if it's good enough for your kids, why is it not good enough for you? Mm-hmm. And second of all, if it's good enough for your kids, then given the fact that kids do what you do and not what you say, then surely you must have to model that if you want your kids to also do it for themselves.
Right.
So we got into the reasons why people might resist this idea of becoming their own best friend and changing their inner dialogue to be more positive self-talk so they can move from being their own worst critic to their own best friend. And what was that first point of resistance that you mentioned?
I said that if people have never been told that they're valuable, or if their whole life they've been told they're not valuable, then why would they value themselves?
Oh, yeah, that was the second point, yeah. But let's dive into that, because that was the point I wanted to make, because there's a lot of men that come to us, and I think you'd be a great person to speak to this. A lot of Christian men that come to us. And as you know, we've got the Powerful Christian Man. That's one of the groups within Workplace. The guys are actually coming to the ranch here. I think in September, they come in, do an event for themselves. And this is one of the concepts that a lot of those men often struggle with in the beginning. Transparently, I'm not religious. I'm not a Christian man. I consider myself to be spiritual, not religious. I think it'd be good to just dive in and explore it a little bit, given the fact that you are Christian, you are religious. So what do you think the guys might be going through, the struggle of the Christian men that come to us? Because we get a lot of them.
The end goal of a Christian's life is to glorify God and to make his name known. Like, those are the two central ends. So to know more of God is basically to put yourself into a place where he is the most important thing. He is the top priority. He is the place. So I'd argue that being a friend to yourself from a Christian perspective would be spending time with God, whether that's in prayer or Bible or whatever. So I don't think that they're mutually exclusive apart from each other. What I think at times a Christian culture that is maybe a little less healthy can imply is that God is all, therefore you are nothing. You're like dirt. You're a sinner. You're low. You're nothing. And while I agree that our sin is low and that our sin is to be forgiven by God, that he made us still in his image with value and with honor and with integrity. And we are literal, the word Christian means little Christ. We are image bearers of God. And so I think the idea of being your own best friend can be like put into this category of self-care that's like overdone in the American culture, which basically says like you are your own end. Yourself is like the most important thing over God, which I think that's when it starts to come in contrast with Christianity. So I think that there is a world within the Christian men that they want to modulate that, where they still say, hey, God is still the most important and high, but that doesn't mean who you are is low and gross or whatever it might be. Because the whole idea of Christianity is that we have that image that Christ does now. Like that's what being saved is. It's that Christ is who we are now. And so if I'm seen as Christ, then I'm seen as holy, blameless, beautiful, valuable, with integrity. And so therefore I should look at myself that way. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah. I'm just thinking of various guys I've worked with who have struggled in the beginning to do things for themselves, and they have struggled to really see and receive these are my words, their greatness, because they've not wanted it to come across as being
prideful,
arrogant or prideful. That's a great one. Yeah, prideful.
Yeah.
So as a result, they often then diminish and play down their results, or the role they play in something, and they can struggle a little bit. And now, obviously, we work with a lot of Christian people who, by going through our programs, they tell me that they see a lot of teachings from Christianity.
Yeah, they do.
Within what it is we do. And oftentimes we have a lot of Christian men and other religions too that come to us with a very weakened faith for whatever reasons. Of whatever reason, rather. And by going through the programs, the end result is that they've often strengthened or rediscovered that faith.
Yeah.
So let's touch on that first point about some of the struggles in the beginning about the prideful piece and such. Because I personally would love to learn a little bit more about that.
Pride is seen in the Bible as like the greatest sin. So that's probably where you're seeing a lot of stuff. It's one of the most referenced. I believe it's one of the most referenced sin apart from fear. There is pride is thinking of pride is thinking of not thinking highly of yourself, but thinking of yourself much. So not thinking much of yourself, but thinking of yourself much. So it's the amount of time you spend thinking about yourself, essentially. And so people can be prideful if they think of themselves less or if they think of themselves more, because they're still thinking of themselves frequently. Does that make sense? And so there's a great book by C.J. Mahaney called Humility that kind of ties these principles together in this idea of what is humility, what is true humility. And after I read that book, it just totally changed my view on pride and arrogance. But remind me of the piece. So that becomes a stumbling block, you said, to a lot of people experiencing what that being a friend to yourself is. Is that what you were saying? Okay. Yeah. So I would say it kind of goes into what I just said, which is there is a way to glorify God even as you achieve more and your light shines brighter. So it's not just, I don't want to talk about myself much. It's like, no, you should be talking about yourself more because God gave you the ability to do all those things. So it's not taking credit for the spaces that you've grown in and you've become all like higher. And it's saying, man, thank God he was able to do that. And so it's not prideful if you're giving glory to God for giving you the muscles to work out, for giving you the heart to want to sit and journal, for giving you the ability to give to other people in generosity. Like those, if you boast in those things, cool. Like the Bible talks about boast in the Lord, like boast in him giving you the ability to do that.
Hey guys, I wanted to interrupt this episode because it's dawned on me that many of you guys aren't aware that we actually have a book on how to save your marriage without talking about it. Now, thousands of men have read it, they've reviewed it, and I want to give you the opportunity to do the same. If you're interested in grabbing it, it's a short read, but it's helped a lot of men just like you. And maybe you're not interested in the activation method yet, but this is a small entry point that can really turn things around for you. Go over on Amazon. We have it priced as cheap as Amazon will let us. And that way you have a resource that you can use right now to start getting some results in your marriage. Now let's get back to the episode.
And so I think that there's a way to hold both in hand where it's saying like, man, like there's been a lot of growth and I can see that like being a friend with myself is only due to the like to what the things and the resources and the stuff that God's given me.
I can see that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Selfishly, luckily, I see a lot of men make this transition.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful thing. Again, I'm not religious, but seeing the men we work with strengthen their faith.
Yeah.
And the energy they have and the perspective and who they are as men and as leaders and fathers, and they're impressive to be around.
It's amazing. Like I think that when you're able to connect to that, like, oh man, like things are great. Like I'm so thankful that God's done. It's really it rests in gratefulness and thankfulness and what God's done in their lives. There's just like a magneticism that I feel to people in the church that are like that. And a lot of our men that go through. I'm just like, man, I can feel you connecting with God in a level, like just really tuning into like what the Spirit, which is resting in your soul. Like we are a home for the Spirit of God. And I can feel that in you. Like I can see that and I recognize it because it's in me. And I love it. It's some of the most encouraging, inspiring conversations. And guys have come out of our alpha resets. And the guys that have really grown in their faith are really connected something. I'm thinking of someone specifically, and he was just like on his knees before God. And I could feel it after his retreat ended. And because he was talking to me and he was just like, man. And I was like, I can sense the Spirit like alive in you again. And because that's really what it is surrendering to letting God take over and do the work so you can be like, man, like I've grown a lot, but it's all thanks to God. So
yeah, it's a wonderful thing. Not only the energy they bring and who they become as men and leaders and fathers and such, but also the relationship, from my perspective, the relationship they then rediscover with themselves as well.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It is. It is. And I would consider that them remembering how to be their own best friend.
Yeah.
Because they often talk about they've rediscovered, which denotes that they had it before and they've found it again.
Yeah.
Only this time they've found it in a bigger way and it's amplified.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ways that I see a lot of Christian guys rediscover like the power of God in their lives is through silence. Like, and I think that's what we create a lot of here. It's because the world is so loud and your phone is loud. All the voices. I remember you used to say, I turn down the noise outside so I can turn up the noise in. And I think that's what I see a lot of Christian guys coming here and doing. They're just turning down the outside noise so they can hear the voice of God louder. And that creates obviously a more powerful, better relationship with self, which obviously Christians believe the Spirit rests in you, which is meaning like I have the quiet to speak to the Spirit and speak to God. And it's powerful.
It is, yeah. And again, as somebody that isn't religious, I feel it from them.
Yeah.
You know, I feel that the power and the energy from them is
That's
palpable.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're people I want to be around as well. They're great guys, huge hearts. They become very humble. Well, they weren't humble before, but there's a real humility.
Softness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I can think of one guy in particular who used to, very religious guy, lost touch with his faith somewhat. During that period also got sucked into the trap of trying to keep up with the Joneses, cars, houses, so on.
Yeah.
And then on the side of the program, downsized,
Oh, wow.
sold the cars, It became the happiest he'd been in years.
Yeah.
And the most connected he'd been in years, not only to himself, but to God, to his family, to other people.
It's interesting watching people redefine what treasure looks like as they go through what that I just heard, oh, he remembered what his treasure really was. And because he sold all the things that didn't really matter, because he realized the connection and the real treasure was that connection with God, connection with self through God. And yeah, it's beautiful thinking about it from a financial wealth perspective to a true soul treasure. It's always going to be more valuable.
Can I jump in two different directions on this episode, which has been great.
Yeah.
I've loved it. And I think the listeners are going to resonate. It's not something we talk about very often.
No.
At all. I don't think we've spoken about it yet. Just going back to the best friend piece.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to touch on this because we have so many guys of faith, men of faith, different types of faith, that maybe listening to this, and when I was asking, well, I don't understand, why would people make it so hard? I think this is one of the key conversations.
Yeah. It's a great point.
What they've been taught to believe. So just going back to the idea of becoming your own best friend.
Why would people not?
Yeah, are there any other things that you can think of as to why people would resist that?
Yeah, I don't know if I said this, but I think a purposeful sabotage, like an idea that they aren't worth that to themselves. Like I'm not worth being a friend to myself. Like I don't deserve, that's it. I don't deserve the grace. I don't deserve the love. I don't deserve the kindness. Therefore, I'm going to put myself in spaces where I intentionally can't serve myself.
That's true.
I mean, and sabotage can come down to a bunch of different reasons as to why you would engage in that type of behavior. It could be a number of different things. But I can tell you that's probably my biggest thing that I go, as you can imagine, that I go to fight being a friend to myself. It's this, I'm just going and maybe I get distracted with my day. And then I feel guilty for not having taken that time for myself. So then I just avoid it more by running from it. And then just create that cycle day after day after day. And until I'm in a place where I'm just like totally dead. And then I'll do it. Because I'm like, I have to be really like thirsting to actually drink from the water. And I think those are patterns that have built from probably childhood of being told I wasn't as valuable, or perceiving that I wasn't valuable, that I wasn't worth time for me, that I wasn't. So do all the other things, make sure all those things are taken care of, and go to sleep and just pretend that it doesn't matter that you didn't take care of yourself. And you'll find yourself in a big hole and longing for everyone else to take care of you really quickly.
So what advice would you give to somebody in that position?
Take care of yourself. No, I would say investigate what need you're meeting by avoiding it. Because if you keep doing it, there's something that's it's serving you. What it was serving me was, you know this, I can't remember though. It's been a while since I've engaged, thankfully, in this type of behavior. But I think the need that it was meeting in me was that I enjoyed the chaos. That's what it was. That I've said this on other podcasts, but peace feels like boredom to those who grew up in chaos. So it created too much peace that I didn't even know what to do with my life. I only knew how to function in the problem solving. I only knew how to function in the chaos. That was my story, at least. And I had to understand where that story came from and then let it go, which is the hard part, perceived hard part. And then say like, no, I'm uncomfortable in this piece. I'm uncomfortable in everything being okay, but I'm just going to keep doing it because this has to be my new normal. I had to reset what normal was, because normal used to be chaos and not taking care of myself. And my new normal had to be okay and sit in the boredom, be okay and sit in the peace. And that, because I matter, because I'm valuable, because I'm all these things that I didn't grow up believing that I was. And self-talk, those were, and then giving myself that time during the day just reaffirmed the idea I am valuable. The more time you give yourself, the more you're giving yourself the feedback loop that I'm worth that time. But the less time you give to yourself, the more you're giving yourself that feedback loop of, I can wait on myself. I don't need to be there for me. And yeah, it's disciplining yourself to the place of understanding what need you're meeting and then breaking it.
Beautiful. Well, guys, you heard it from Mrs. Moore Parks, an expert in overcoming this.
I don't know about that.
But look, in all seriousness, it's hard. It can be a struggle to become your own best friend. But as we say at TPM, the journey is the destination. It never ends. And it's definitely one that's worthwhile. So if either of these two episodes have resonated with you, then please, the moment of insight, take massive action. We'll see you next time on the TPM show.